Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PMI Live. It's great to have you with us. Today's topic is celebrating success, learning from failure, getting the most from your improvement projects. Other episodes in the series have covered the layer above, so getting the most from your improvement program. Today, we're diving down. Very shortly, I'll ask my good friend and colleague, Dennis, who is in the hot seat today, to elaborate on what we're going to cover. But before I do that, some housekeeping first. Anyone that's not joined us before, to familiarize yourself with the tools and controls, primarily what we're interested in is the chat and the commenting functionality. These sessions are live. Dennis is really here, as you can see. Do take advantage of that and put your questions and comments to him. As the name suggests, PMI Live is just that. It's a live experience, and today is no exception. We have got some polling and some exercises, and as ever, the value comes out of the discussion in these sessions. So you guide us, you tell us which way you want us to go. Customize this to your particular circumstances as far as you can. Keep us on our toes for the final PMI Live of the year. So for those of you joining us on the live streams on LinkedIn, YouTube, and the other one, Facebook, that's it. Please do, if you want to take part in the live exercises, hop on over to pmi.co.uk/webinars, where you can still register and join the live session right now. So don't hesitate to do that. Earlier on, I posted in the chat the link to our company LinkedIn page. That is the best way to follow us and the place to find all the latest updates from us, including all of our thought leadership content, etc. And also you can find out all our contact details should there be anything you want to chat about. As you will gather from today, we love to talk. So on that note, Dennis, would you like to take us through the topic today, the content you're going to cover?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everybody. Lovely seeing you all. And thank you, Rich, for the kind introduction and being here on the last webinar of this year.
Pleasure.
So, and with sound. So, Richard, so today I'm going to talk through the following topics. First of all, how to create a positive learning environment for yourself and for the enterprise within which you operate. Then about the learning process and a really simple tool. Then the learning journey throughout an improvement project, top tips, and by the end there'll also be 3 small Christmas gifts as we are in a festive spirit.
So Dennis, before you kick off then, I think when we discussed this topic with several people as we put it together, there was surprise that you're starting in the organization yourself rather than diving into the detail around the projects. Why have you decided to structure the session like that?
For one simple reason, the fact that you have a learning mindset is a great start. But if you are isolated from the enterprise and the enterprise hasn't got the same learning mindset, you are very often on a losing battle. And then at some point you will stop with learning because the environment within which you operate is not encouraging it. So it has to be the two working together, and they can both therefore support and grow in tandem.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
So first of all, so language. Language is so important in everything that we do, and also about failure. So have a look at these lovely Christmas baubles to stay in the festive spirits, although the words on them are not necessarily festive. Failure, disaster, learning, mistakes, predictions. And if you read some of the quotes that I hear time and time again when I review projects, when I coach sponsors, when I work with leadership teams, those are the kind of quotes that come here. I failed in achieving my target. That was a disaster. Thankfully, I didn't make a prediction because we get it always wrong, etc., etc. So the language around failure very often is a negative language. And I don't know if our audience, our participants recognize that within their environment or within their personal circumstances as well. So language is important here, Rich. And therefore, if you think about learning as we have it, here's the beautiful outcomes model, which is such a fundamental model to engage and enable change. And within it, of course, the outcomes we get today are in a result of the systems and processes. And when you go all the way up this tree here, It comes to the assumptions and the attitudes all the way up here. So we have to change assumptions and attitudes that we hold as individuals to enable change for ourselves, but also for the enterprise. And there's this lovely quote from Claude Bernard. He was a French physiologist in the 19th century. It's what we think we know that keeps us from learning. Therefore, you only learn something new by stepping from the known into the unknown. And the quote is in two parts on purpose. The first part, how I interpret it, is about a self-misplaced confidence that says, I know everything, and therefore I will not learn. And I see this a lot with people who think they know. And often that's therefore a good sign that actually they don't know very much. And then the next step, the second half of this, it's about doing something, taking now the action to put the thoughts into practice. And you only learn something, you said, to go from the known to the unknown by stepping over a boundary.
Dennis, got first couple of questions in, if I may. First one's from Moses, referring actually to your last slide. And it's a question on what's Dennis's observation on and thoughts on why predictions are so hard to come by in organizations?
Brilliant question. So in university environments, so you think about it, your PhD thesis, your master's thesis, very often making a prediction is the start of that journey of discovery. But somehow when we go into business organization, the making of predictions in the everyday is often not there. I mean, yes, we see it in financial budgeting and forecasting, but not in the everyday. And one of the reasons why I see this, Rich, is because people have a fear of being wrong, a fear of being told off when they don't quite hit that prediction that they said was a prediction.
Yeah, but the budget example is an interesting one you phrase there, though, Dennis, because yes, budgets are predictable, yet we're often held, predictions, they are not predictable, predictions, but yet we're held accountable when we don't meet budget.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dichotomy, that, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, of course, we want to be right. And we see this in lots of simulations that we do to encourage people to not get it right first time. When they do get it right, to make a prediction, people go, yay, well done. But the moment that they don't get a prediction quite right, there's not a sense of, oh, this was learning, and therefore what did we learn from it and how to make it better? This was, we got it wrong. This was bad. This was negative. And I think, therefore, the language here is so important. The language you use to yourself in your thinking, in your thought processes, but also with others that you interact with.
Cool. Thanks, Dennis. The second one was just the sequencing on your next slide on the prediction, on the outcomes model. The question is, can you just explain the thinking theories element of this, please?
Sure. So if you think about the bottom, which is the outcomes, so we always get what we always got if we always do what we've always done. The question, though, is where did this come from? And very often the systems and the processes as we have them today come from a decision that we've made in the past. This was a useful way of doing it. The question, however, is where did the decisions come from? Decisions come from thinking. They come from theories that we have. Now, the theories that we have are based on a lot of times unconscious thinking or conscious thinking. This worked in the past, therefore it will work again. That could be a theory that I hold. Now, the reason why it's often unconscious, of course, is because this is how our brain likes to operate. In an unconscious way, it's more energy efficient. However, in business, that is not always a good thing to have as a standard mode of thinking. So therefore, back to the top here, we need to make the assumptions and the attitudes at the core and make them explicit, make the thinking theories, therefore, conscious decisions. And that's what sits behind it. Excellent.
Thanks, Dennis. That's really helpful.
So, and I've just had my lovely buddy who wants to come in. My cat has just decided to exit from the window. It's just jumping back in again. So anyway,
let's see how that interferes with the process or indeed the outcomes of this session.
So I don't know if you've been watching the news, lovely participants today, but this week there was a major technological breakthrough, which is about something called fusion ignition, where there was more energy generated in a fusion experiment than was put into it. But when I watched it, something struck me in the 1 hour presentation given by various, very skilled, very bright people. And that was that they started this journey a century ago. They realized fusion existed as a process. They then went on to experiment, how can we now capture this fusion in a way that we can replicate this on Earth? And over the last 60 years, there was an accelerated program through funding and through creating an environment of learning to achieve the outcome we had this week. Now, they think they're still 30 years away from making it a commercial viable product or service. But boy, what a milestone. But the thing that struck me listening to the language, it was all around learning. And therefore, I want to come back to this part of the conversation. Now, for people that are familiar with transactional analysis, they will recognize these as 3 different ego states: parent, adult, child. But perhaps you recognize this conversation here. The organization reviews your project and they say, hey, that's not a very good project. And you respond, well, you didn't support me, so this is the best that I could do on my own accord. In transactional analysis, therefore, this is actually referred to as a critical parent telling off the child in this case, and the child responding in the way child would respond, well, you should have supported me better then. Now, this type of learning, therefore, is not actually helpful in terms of creating a learning process. And the reason why I wanted to share that is because I want to go into a poll here actually with the participants to say, lovely participants, tell me now about your own organization. How do you feel that your organization is supporting you in terms of being a learning organization? So there's 4 options there: mostly agree, somewhat disagree, and mostly disagree. Rich.
Okay. So I'll draw it to a close there. So I think we've got a balance there between 2 and 3, sitting in the middle of the 2 options. So somewhat agree, somewhat disagree.
Yeah.
Dennis, what were you expecting?
Indeed, Rich, I was expecting the majority to be in category 2, somewhat agree.
Okay.
I was expecting then the second one actually to be somewhat disagree, followed by mostly agree, and finally mostly disagree. So that was that was my prediction going into this. So I'm pleased to see that most people somewhat agree actually, with a happy dusting of mostly agree, and also somewhat disagree.
So thinking about this, obviously it's context specific, isn't it? So those of you that are in the live session, please do, if you'd like to add any comments to elaborate on that, and if it is context specific, tell us about that context so that we can put that to Dennis as we proceed through the presentation. Okay, thanks, Dennis. If you want to press on.
Clearly, the personal mindset is one part of it when it comes to learning. And therefore, on this particular section here, back to transactional analysis, back to the language that we use, how we communicate with others and how others receive us, the best way of making sure that we create a positive environment for learning is when we are adults to adults. Now, and I'm sure, Rich, that you will recognize this as well, whether it's in a business or in a personal situation. Adult to adult is very hard to stay in at all times. Yeah, it's the easiest thing on the planet to occasionally fall back into a critical parent telling off somebody, and then you go, I should approach that differently.
Look, I think you're right, though, Dennis. I think the key is it's hard. So therefore, don't expect, and we shouldn't expect or be disappointed when everyone can't maintain the ideal behavioral state all of the time. We're human machines by definition. There's a lot going on here. And I think sometimes that can be quite painful, personally, and thinking about your own behaviors and the behaviors of others as well. But as you say, you nail on the head. It's hard.
Yeah. But I can tell you what, there's a particular example that springs to mind where I was part of a previous organization, previous life, and there was an unmitigated disaster that happened, and I was ready to be told off. but my line manager at the time was completely adult. And I still remember to this day what he said at that time. I was expecting to be fired, as a matter of fact. It was such a big issue that happened.
You missed that off your CV, Dennis.
But the good news was, he said, consider this an expensive learning experience.
Okay.
I felt that big. I left the room intact, ego slightly intact, but boy, was I some great learning about how to behave. And of course, did I learn? Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, in that particular organization, we were used to blowing things up, but this was blowing things up, which wasn't on purpose. So yeah, that was the context. So clearly, safety critical, mission critical, of course, critical parent does play a role. Don't get me wrong. But as much as possible, when we talk about learning, adult to adult, even if it's with people who are not necessarily considering themselves to be adult, and that's where the hard part comes in.
Mm.
So I want to move on to process, therefore. And for the process, I want to think about the process of learning around the improvement project. And learning therefore needs to happen before we do the project, during the project, and then of course also after the project. And I don't know about the participants, but here perhaps people start to feel uncomfortable already. Learning before and learning after, let alone learning during. So let me talk you through a few of the points here. So first of all, before you start your improvement project, think about, have we actually learned from previous projects? Have we learned about what these previous projects actually were able to deliver within the confines, the constraints of the enterprise? Think about the methodology. How well are people able to deploy and carry out improvement methodology within their project? What got in their way? And finally, point number 3 there, how do people feel and deal with the changes that were put upon them now as part of the improvement project? So therefore, the bit at the bottom, Rich, what learning do we need to consider on this project? And boy, if you do that at the start of the project, before you even start, you're already in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Is that familiar to people? Let us know in the chat.
I mean, it's quite interesting. A while back, I did a small business finance course to understand a bit more about finance. And the first thing that the teacher says, if you set up your own business, go and talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. And he said, not for the reason that you want to go bankrupt, but what can you learn about what do you need to consider before you go into business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so a really powerful insight there. So during, of course, if you think about the improvement cycle, every single phase of the improvement cycle, we could insert a stage, we could insert a gate review here. I don't see them often done very well or in a formalized way.
And Dennis,
Now,
for anyone not familiar with the improvement cycle, quick quick detail how it relates to DMAIC.
So as you can see, DMAIC is on the second inner circle, and the cycle on the outside is the PMI cycle. Interestingly, born in the same year, created in the same year, 1984, when PMI actually started on this journey. So hence they have this beautiful overlap. The circle on the outside, therefore, Rich, is a bit more of a refinement, in my humble opinion, of the activities that you undertake as part of any DMAIC project.
Say a great deal of refinement, to be honest, Dennis. I think you're being very modest.
English tact? So yeah, but at the bottom here, I want to just draw the attention to the bottom there. What I see, if a gate review is done, is the gate review is only done with a coach or with the team. And my top tip here, to straight away give you one of the top tips, involve your sponsor in these gate reviews. At the end of the day, it's their problem that you're fixing, and it also is their responsibility to make sure the solution gets implemented within the organization. And somehow there's a dichotomy between the project leader, the green belt or the black belt, and the sponsor. And therefore there's a huge gap, I think, often in the way we organize for improvement, which is the role of the sponsor. And then after, of course, now after, when you read the question on the right-hand side, they are exactly the same as the questions on the left-hand side before. How did we do this project? Which method did we use? Did it work well for us? And how did people do the changes? Therefore, what is the knowledge that we've now got that we can pass on to the next project? So here's therefore my before, during, and after for learning. The other model, therefore, to consider in this is the GIB model, the change burger you see on the right-hand side. The what we do, the how we do it, and the social and emotional and political realities, the feelings. So how are we learning both as an individual on these three levels, but also as an enterprise? And again, people focus on task, and especially when they put under pressure. I see it too often. The process gets pushed out of the way, and also how people feel about it, because we have to get the job done. So, which method, therefore, should we use for learning? Now, for the people that have worked with us, they will not be surprised by, of course, what's going to appear in the middle here. Plan, do, study, act. The scientific model for learning. And I always encourage anybody who understands this model to keep practicing it in the everyday. And not just that, teach it to your colleagues. And if you have children, your own or from somebody else where you're close to, teach them this model. It's not a common model to be taught at school or in any formal education. Variations on them are taught, but not this particular model. And it's such a simple model, so elegant and so powerful. So around this, I want to focus on just some key points around each of the four elements of this model, Rich. So number one, when you are on the plan stage, know what you're trying to accomplish and do not pass go. Then make multiple theories, not just the one that you think is going to work, but also think about alternative theories. And then finally, as we spoke earlier, make a prediction, which is often overlooked. I think if I do this, that will happen. Make that a normal part of your being. One of the ways you could practice it, if you're traveling somewhere today or this weekend, make a prediction about how long you think it takes. Of course, we've got the benefit of Google Maps or Bing Maps or other methods that will tell us what their prediction is, but that's what they are. They are a prediction. They are not fact. Then on test, on the do bit, test, test, and test again. Don't just stop after doing it once, but do it 2-3 times. And test as small scale as you can. And the final bit around it is observe in the moment and learn from the moment. There's many activities I do also in my private life where I do some kind of activity like woodcraft. And in this woodcraft, for example, I do some carving. And every single time we carve, so this is one of the things I carved out of a solid bit of wood. And every single time you carve on this, you think, okay, was that all right? How did that feel, that one cut? Now, it takes months to carve and to get it right. And every single time you carve it, I consider it to be a test of getting the perfect cut on this piece of carving. And there's something magical about having that mindset around the act of doing, to consider every single act of doing as a test. Then take the time to study, reflect. Now, it can be a micro moment, it can be days, it can be weeks of studying, and then compare the outcomes with the predictions. Only last weekend, I was talking to a gentleman who was doing a biotechnologist looking at a new way of harnessing biosignals. And they realized that I had a very high level of noise within the signal. And they were trying to discount it because they didn't want this noise because they were looking for a signal. But when they started digging into the noise within the signal, they realized there was another signal in there of another biosignal. They therefore realized that their technological solution was actually offering the ability to take two critical biosignals in a new way. But they therefore studied, they realized the prediction wasn't right, and the data was telling them there was something else there. So there was something beautiful in the discussion. And then finally, in ACT, it's not just about yes or no, pass or fail. It's actually adopt, adapt, abandon. I think there's something powerful again in having the language of adopt, adapt, and abandon within your vocabulary. So I would encourage you to all have these different key points here. So that brings me therefore to two important quotes, and by all means, feel free to steal them with pride. Quote number one, I don't want you to go from 0 to 100. Focus, first of all, going from 0 to 2. Take that first step. Once you've taken that first step, then go to 2 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on until you get to 100. So build sustainable habits through gradual progression. There's a magic in there. So where you're able to do that within your business life, within your private life, try it that way. Small steps, and learn from every single small step. The other quote came from my first ever engagement with PMI, which was in Latin America. And the local director of improvement stood up in front of 24 very bright, very intelligent, very driven people. And he told them this first sentence: I want you to fail. And there was a pause. There was a sigh of what in the organization, within the audience. He's just told us to fail. But then he proceeded: I want you to fail little and often. And they went, huh? It feels bad that I want you to fail, but I still don't get it. And then he finished: I also want you to improve. I want you to improve little and often. I thought, wow, that's powerful. So he was acting on behalf of the enterprise. He was representing the enterprise, saying, guys, it's perfectly right not to get it right first time, but keep learning, and keep learning in small steps, and be not afraid to fail on that journey. Now, when is the last time that somebody came to you and says, I'm actually happy for you to fail in a safe manner? What a powerful statement that is.
I think sometimes also, Dennis, you find people occasionally do say it, but their actions subsequently don't suggest they meant it.
Yes, the words and the actions. And so then, when I review projects, and especially projects, we go into something called design of experiments, where we know some experiments may not always get to fruition and will end in failure. One of the key questions I will ask is, what's therefore your budget for failure? What's your budget for not getting it quite right first time? They go, well, we haven't got a budget. We have rework. Right. Let's formalize that. That rework that you do, that's actually a budget for not getting it right first time, if it's done in a controlled manner, of course, not a reactive manner. So I want to move on now to the learning mindset. We've spoken a little bit about process. Let's move on to learning mindset for you and the enterprise. And there's something called a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. There was a lovely research done by a lady called Dr. Carol Dweck of Stanford University. And she came up with this phrase, growth mindset. And she said to thrive on a challenge means you have a growth mindset. You don't see failure as a way to describe yourself, but as a springboard for growth and developing your abilities. So I've summarized on the right-hand side of the slide now a little bit what I consider to be key attributes to help you to develop that growth mindset. Cultivate humility. Realize that you are not perfect. And that there's always opportunity for listening, engaging, and learning. Therefore, be ready to listen to feedback from others, motivational, developmental feedback. Take on other people's views. Whether they're right or not right doesn't matter, but listen to them and therefore seek to understand what is their truth. What do I understand about their truth, their ways of seeing the same thing that I see? What can I learn from that? Practice retrospection, introspection. Now, retrospection means we review the outcomes of the actions we did. Introspection means I'm going to review how I felt on the inside, my emotions, my feelings. How did I now deal with this activity that I did? Both are important components of learning, the doing and, of course, the feeling, the being. Always look for ways to make things better. And finally, see failure as opportunities. And therefore the language, back to language, Rich, language becomes so important around this.
Dennis, we just had a question in asking if people will get copies of the slides. It's actually a copy of the recordings that we share. So anyone that's registered for the live session will get emailed a copy of the recordings where you'll have both the visuals and the voiceover from myself and Dennis. And in addition to that, they'll be published all on our live streams within 30 seconds of this session finishing today. So again, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook as well. But main place, go to LinkedIn and you'll find everything there.
And just to build on that, if anybody wants to talk about anything offline, find me on LinkedIn and we can talk and chat as much as you want around specific elements of this that we covered today.
Best of luck spelling his surname.
There's only one. So, Enterprise Learning Mindset, ELM. We have to find an acronym somewhere in here. Whenever I work with an organization, doesn't matter at what level or at what level of maturity, I always will put a challenge, therefore, in these discussions. Tell me more about your organization, especially around what I call the learning organization. How do you learn? How do you encourage learning? So ELM, therefore, is the practice of considering the entire organization, how to enable an environment where learning and growth are at the center of each and every review. Because too often, Rich, I sit in on performance dialogues and it's all about information sharing. It's about critiquing. Why is this number subtly different from another number? It's not actually about developing, seeking to understand the why, wherefore, and therefore how to do different things in the future.
Yep.
So the key thing here is think about yourself, your own mindset, and of course that of the enterprise around you. And therefore ask yourself also the question, or is there more of an attitude which would be summarized as punishment and reward? Which I do see in an awful lot of organizations, which then leads to the whole discussion around target setting, bonus culture, and, which is the topic for a different webinar, Rich. So, 8 steps to develop the growth mindset. And I'll do this for both the individual and for the enterprise. So, and I would love to see people's feedback also on this, where they see in the chat window, if they have some other suggestions here around this. So first of all, for yourself, listen to the voice within inside you when you've had success or something didn't go quite to plan. What's the voice inside your head? How are you dealing with this internally? Recognize, therefore, you have a choice, that you can do something different if you choose to do so, if so desired. Talk back with a growth mindset voice. So therefore, I say, I will, I can, I want. And then the number 4, of course, practice, the do. Remember, thinking is not sufficient in isolation. The act of doing is what truly matters, to therefore actually test it out in reality. Find help if you need to make that journey safe, of course. And it could well be that the journey is not a safe journey, but you have to therefore consider a certain risk. Therefore, understand what a risk is and see, do I need any support? Find outside help is therefore key. Now, stop seeking approval from others. Yeah, if you think it's right, go for it. Yeah. I rarely have people that actually get stopped from trying something different. But boy, when they've done something different, and therefore the result, of course, in a safe and considered way, always the caveat, very often, that's where unique transformation always comes from. Replace the word failing with learning, and finally take that growth mindset action time and time again. Now, for the enterprise, rather than giving 8 steps, I've actually phrased these as 8 questions. I will not go through all the 8 in great detail, but people can read them, of course, in their own time and much faster than I can talk. But think about your communication. What's the language that the organization is using around learning? And I don't mean just we have a training portfolio, you choose what to go on training for. In the everyday, back to those daily discussions, back to when you've written a report, back to performance dialogues, etc. Do people use the language of learning? So therefore, what choice does the enterprise offer you around enabling you to learn? It's an open dialogue. How does the enterprise encourage failure? Like I said, is there a budget for not getting it right first time? What assistance does the enterprise offer to develop the mindset? Do they benchmark externally? Again, that could be an interesting sign that actually they want to learn, but only as if they're better or worse than somebody else. Rather than saying, I want to be better than myself as an enterprise. Completely different mindset around this. And then the last one, of course, is learning as an active part of enabling the strategy, deploying the strategy. And does your sponsor have the learning growth mindset? Again, very, very important to make sure they are in the right place. So, Rich, here's I want to offer my first Christmas present, which is not my cat, who is being very attention-seeking right now, but it's actually another gift, which is called OPL. Now, the OPL is a lovely, simple tool to enable both the enterprise and the individual to come together in a really simple process with a really simple template to start building and creating that learning mindset, that growth mindset. So on the left-hand side is an SOP. I will not go into detail through that, but within that, of course, the first thing that you will see on here is take time out to learn, to do the 3 C's: concern, cause, countermeasure. And on the right-hand side,
as well as the QR code, I should say, Dennis, our glamorous assistant Neil is going to put those into the URLs into the chat as well, for people to copy and paste. And also, yeah, they're available now.
So the template on the right-hand side, it's a really simple Excel spreadsheet, modified at your leisure, say thank you at some point in the future, buy me a beer, whatever, if you like it. And if you've got an improvement on it, send me a copy of what you actually then did, how you adapted it to your personal situation within your environment. But one thing on here, and that I do want to stress, that in this document, which is around the 3 C's, is the bit at the bottom. And this is about the training and briefing record. I was discussing this only earlier this week with one of our clients who said, this is what we do. This is the normal way. When we have a problem, we come up with this OPL, we train everybody now in the new way of working. And if you weren't present at that point of being trained, we will do it at the next time that we meet up with that individual. Therefore, we actually build the knowledge within individuals concerned. And I think that was extremely powerful and beautiful to hear. So OPL, 1 point lesson, sometimes it's also called SPL, single point lesson. So summarizing this section here, Rich, how do we therefore create this positive learning environment? Number 1, back to Deming's quote, by which method will we achieve our outcome? So here again, what's the method by which we want to learn? Which tools do we use therefore to capture the learning and report, record, and share? Ensure the organization sees learning as a key enabler to growth. I will come back to that point. Ensure the organization therefore focuses on intrinsic learning rather than extrinsic punishment and rewards. It creates a completely different mindset and behavior and culture, therefore, within the organization. Encourage your operators to become conscious daily learners. What I mean by the word conscious, I put that on there on purpose. Unconscious learning is one thing, but if you make the learning conscious, it becomes a far more active part of capturing the learning and also remembering it for the future. And the last point, of course, I said it earlier, record, report, and share.
Excellent.
So, Rich, I want to move on now to a interactive exercise with our lovely participants here, which is around considering the journey throughout an improvement project, the before, the during, and the after.
So in the chat, hopefully, should be appearing the link to the interactive whiteboard, Miro, which Dennis has just put on screen. Whilst Neil's doing that, in fact, I can see it's popped up now. Dennis, can you just talk us around what the question is here and what the ask of the audience is?
So first of all, make sure you do the password to get into this, as Neil has put in the chat window. The question is, what are your typical challenges on your project that you face? And think about the 3 elements. The before you start, what challenge do you face? During the project, what do you face? And also when closing the project, what do you face there?
Good news is we can see we've got some people in, so that hopefully means that the password, I'm in, I can see myself. Yep, visitors starting to appear. So click on the link, enter the password. You don't need to sign up with your username or anything like that. You can just go straight in. And we're going to give you 4 minutes for this. Just fill in, no right or wrong answers. The only correct thing to do is one thing on a single post-it. 1 item per post-it would be great. Okie dokes. So in the last 30 seconds, let's start having a roundup of what we've got here, Dennis, and see what we've got. So looking over on, before you start, we've got clarity on goals, sponsor sign off, incorporating previous lessons that have been learned. One loud voice who overwhelms others, a clear steer on priorities, lack of voice of the customer, lack of cross-functional support. I don't know what other projects have happened in the organization now. We've got our first loop here with a comment I've seen at the after the project has finished. Common misunderstanding of missions, priorities, yes. So let's have a look at this during the session, Dennis, during the project. So got clarity on goals, commitment to review, sponsor commitment to review, yes. getting people diverted back to BAU, priorities changing, getting everyone to agree, no reviews with sponsor. That's the second one of those we've seen. Lack of coaching support, project gets switched off, but no one tells you, okay. Getting decisions made, organizational support for project, difficult to get real opportunity to test, no test environment. Okay. And then finally, where in the closing stage of the project, what does success look like? No one wants to own the learning lessons, documented, not lessons not learned. No one really bothers with project closure. Lessons are not shared across the company. There's the link I was referring to earlier on. Set off to next problem next time. No time to reflect. Difficult to manage knowledge around projects and learning. Everyone moves on quickly. Exit strategy implementation for BAU. If we document lessons learned, I feel like no one will ever use them. A bit of a waste of time. Great points, all of these. So in the section Dennis is about to move on to in the final section, he's going to take these three aspects that we've just talked about. Thank you for your comments, and we're going to see Dennis's take on each one of these points.
And so thank you for that, Rich, and thank you for the participants to end these challenges here that you've identified. So thank you for that. I straight away want to come to one on here. The reason being is I've just come off a 1.5 year project within a client, which was absolutely fantastic in terms of learning. And by the end of it, this organization has a standard process which they call a diamond review. And the diamond review, the purpose is to share the learning and the successes of the project, and then also to share what went well and what should be different next time. And we did that. We did just that. Now, the outcome of that in this particular case was such that the COO of the organization said, "This is brilliant. I want to seek an audience with you guys, and you tell me now about this project." After we said, "This project is so brilliant, I now want you to go and present this to the executive of this large multinational." Again, absolutely fantastic. And after that, what happened is that they have an internal OE conference, and there it got presented as the keynote speech of the conference around the learning that the project lead had done during that journey. Now, wow, there is an organization that understands learning, and there's an organization that also knows then how to share and communicate effectively. Now, the reason why I mentioned this, take that away as a top tip, create an environment. Now, so, we used to have gallery walks where projects get put on the wall around the sharing, and therefore building that network around, what did we learn from that? And
But Dennis, it's the culture, it's also the process, though, isn't it? So what you've just described there is actually the process for sharing. So it's not just saying share this stuff out, it's having a process and a means and a practical means by which to do it. And the loop I referred to, it just goes back and back and back in terms of a PDSA to help make next time better. But I think it's fair to say the audience are reflecting what we often see in our clients. It is not paid attention to sufficiently.
No, it's not. So if I therefore then take the key learnings that I've seen therefore from the Miro board, and then my reflection on this. Now, what typically goes well, by the way, let's start with a positive. Normally, people will have a problem that is real to tackle. They form a team and they understand the basics of the problem before they start. The challenges, absolutely. We fail to learn from the past, as you said. We fail to engage with the onboarding of the sponsor. Lack of data, not cleanly aligned with business objectives, or the project leader writes the charter themselves, not with the sponsor. So, top tip. Co-write the charter with your sponsor. At the end of the day, it is their problem that you're trying to fix. And if the mindset is like that, the ownership therefore lies with typically somebody more senior in the organization. It just helps to remove barriers. So think about therefore a sponsor who's much more hands-on. There's nothing wrong with executive sponsor, but have also then an operational sponsor if your organization is designed as such. Have a black belt or master black belt. Have a competent improvement coach to review your charter and sidebook at the beginning to at least make sure you're starting on the right journey. And then that last point, another thing was also mentioned a number of times on the Miro board, ensure you have a formal review with your sponsor, not just an informal come and bother me when you have a problem. I trust you to do the right thing kind of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So moving therefore on to during the project, team finds something to improve. They find something learning is shareable. Most projects will do something like that. Challenges. They don't go to Gemba. Now, Rich, Gemba, as you know, means going to the real place where the work happens, physically or virtually, especially now, of course, in remote working, but follow the process for real. Because only when you do that, then you're able to dive deep enough to the problem. And therefore, you also realize what measures, what data is actually critical to supporting the deeper understanding of the problem. So top tips, go to Gamba and go to Gamba again and again and again. Do it multiple times, every single time with slightly different lenses, slightly different questions. You will find new information, new data to use.
Yep.
So therefore, a deep dive, select the right data. And the last one, I can't stress enough, stick to the PMI improvement cycle. Do not shortcut this. I see time and time again where people go too fast through this. So what goes well? When I close our report, most people write something of some sort, even if it's an email. Yeah, but something. Most people will present a finding to a wider audience. Again, very loosely defined. It could be a single individual, of course. And most people will communicate in some form or another. However, we can build on that. And I think that's what I also read on that last section of the My report. Now, therefore, challenges. Actually, 2 challenges I want to pose to the participants. No formal deadline for improvement projects. I see that a lot. And also recognizing that's failure still learning. If the organization has a mindset to say, right, you will do an improvement project, and by the way, you only have 3 months or 6 months, nothing, not longer than that. Make sure that in 3 or 6 month time, the project is finished. It drives scope, it drives the resources, and of course, it drives the time that you need to spend on it. That means the organization has to take it seriously as part of the everyday. So BAU becomes doing projects. That is BAU. Doing improvements is part of BAU. So shift that mindset again around what BAU actually means. Do the project or do the job, improve the job. So use a standard template, look for similarities, celebrate learning, and finally, do that formal learning review on 2 levels.
And I should say, in the subject of templates, Dennis is about to do a summary of the session, and then the next slide we've got the PMI project template. We'll be showing a QR code and URL for as well in a moment.
So let me summarize therefore this webinar, Rich. Develop that growth learning mindset in yourself, enterprise, and yourself. Apply therefore that PDSA habitually in your everyday working. Ensure your sponsors actively involved, owns, and therefore helps with the change. Document the learning from failures. And think about a method. I saw one person saying it, okay, how do we now help with this within the organization? Find a way, knowledge management. And last but not least, you are not alone. Seek support. There's always a friend out there that can assist.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dennis, I'm just going to jump and take over the share, if that's all right.
Sure.
And I will share that link, which hopefully is now appearing, and you can see on my screen is sharing. There's the link, folks. So this is the project report that I mentioned. Download it there. It's also in the chat in the session. Feel free to use as you wish. Again, if you have any questions on that, any questions on the stages or the elements within it, just get in touch with us. PMI.co.uk / in fact, just PMI.co.uk, and you'll find the contact pages.
And by the way, the template is 110 pages long. Do not be scared by that. It's very, very comprehensive to guide you, to support you in that learning journey.
Indeed. We're all about the QR codes today. So PMI Live for 2023. We're kicking off. Dennis and I will be back in January for this first one, which is improvement trends for 2023. This is what we're seeing in our client base, what we're seeing in the industry, and thought leadership for what's coming up in 23 and how to meet your challenges. And then new one for us in February, we've got a product showcase dealing with, again, coming back to this question of challenges. Many of you struggle with using control charts outside of the project environment in your day-to-day process management. We've partnered with a company called Cloud2, and we'll be showcasing their Power BI add-in, Easy SPC, which we're using ourselves. We'll be showing you how we use it internally. and hosting a live session with both us and the tech guys as well from Cloud2 will be joining us for that session. And so very finally is that there, which is the thought leadership content. As you may know, we've just recently launched a brand new podcast series, Uncommon Sense, tool-based focused, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, all available on the knowledge base, as well as all the good podcast services. So find that on pmi.co.uk, and then you'll find the Knowledge Hub on the top of the screen. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's been great. Thank you for participation. Thank you for the questions. All that remains to say is thank you, wishing you a very happy and safe, relaxing holiday period. And great to see you in January 2023 for improvement trends with myself and Dennis. Thanks everyone.